All right, all right.
Hi, you look so nice.
Thank you.
I just took a quick shower. Hi, Jessica, sister. Hey, Jessica, since you're here early, can I ask you to do something for me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hi, I'm glad to see you. Do you know Chris?
I know of him.
Yes.
He's been doing.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Chris. How are you?
Doing well.
Jessica.
I'm nervous.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to do great. Jessica and Chris, and when Danita comes on, I'm going to make you co-host so you can help admit people. And Jessica, because I'm going to bow out, and I've gotten to hear him do this before, and I'm going to let you guys enjoy it. And Jessica, will you also help to watch the chat?
Yes.
And I've asked Danita to do that too. And so Chris, Danita, and Jessica might interrupt you on occasion to say something in the chat or something like that. Okay. And of course, and they've got the chat going too. Jessica, I think I will also, I'll put something in the chat too. And I just want to make a couple announcements. So, okay.
Okay.
Should I let people in? I guess so.
We're 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold until 7:35, just for any leg stragglers.
Okay.
And so someone will need to continue watching the waiting room for folks to get in.
Sure.
As well as Larry, you're gonna make us host, right? So we can see Q&A.
Oh yeah, so I'm doing that right now.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, Jessica, there you go.
Got it. I have people already. Let me see.
You can let them in, and I'm going to put something in the chat for when they come in.
Anita's coming in.
Okay.
Sean Jackson is one of my people.
Hey, Sean, welcome. So glad you're here. Let's see. And I see Brian. Hi, Brian. Welcome. I just put something kind of fun for us to get started in the chat there. We were talking today on our Facebook group about how this anti-racism work that we do, you know, it's not something you're ever done with. And so it can get discouraging for sure. And I have found myself, especially this week, being, you know, a stressful, emotional week in anti-racism. wanting to do the laundry instead or do the dishes instead, because they're something I can do and finish and see it done. I know, Jessica, you were saying you like to clean your floors, right?
That was actually Rachel.
Oh yeah, Rachel said that. Rachel said that.
I am a bit of a clean freak, so I do that when I get overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, it's just a good reminder that our work never ends. So when you can, if there are little tasks in your day that you're able to finish, that's kind of nice to do those things. Plant a flower or something like that. It's hard work. So we try to challenge each other to find a little joy in every day. Thank you guys for being here. And as we're coming in, hi Yvette, hi Sharon, welcome Laura, welcome Sean. So Sean,
Hi.
do you know Chris through Be the Bridge?
Yes, I do. Yes. Yeah. He's me and him probably chat probably daily.
Oh wow,
Just
that's
about,
awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty
So,
much.
yeah.
Well, so
Yeah,
glad
just in light of everything going on, we just keep in touch and try to encourage each other just through, everything that's going on. And we got a couple friends that are, I guess, also on Breeder Bitch that we chat with too, and just try to encourage each other in this hard space we're in.
Well, thank you for being here for this important conversation. Sean, may I put a question to you that came on our Facebook group today?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. It was about how, in light of, what's been happening, how people like me can be a good white ally if we see someone being a Black person being pulled over, especially if they're out of the car being questioned by police. Chris was encouraging us, yeah, go ahead and stop your car a little ways away and get out of the car and just be a presence. What do you think about that?
Oh,
Yes, I would echo that. I would also say, I mean, now we live in such a technology space. If you're able to, at least call somebody, record if you can, just the interaction, because nowadays we never know. And a lot of what we come to know about these situations is because somebody thankfully had some type of recording device on them. And so, yeah, just your presence, I think, helps people know that, you're okay. And so I've actually had this happen to me probably about a good 6 or 7 months ago. Was pulled over just for a traffic violation or whatever. And somebody did it for me. And they would have been across the intersection, but they got out their car and kind of made a wave at me to let me know that they were there and recording what was going on. And it just made me feel at ease that I didn't have to panic, that I knew somebody had my back in a sense. And so that was a really helpful thing. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Sean. So they just kind of pulled over, they saw you being pulled over and kind of pulled over safely across the way. And did they stay in their car?
Well, they got out and eventually came over, but they remained a distance, to keep from interfering with anything. But they kind of let me know that they were recording, which kind of put me at ease that I didn't have to kind of try to record or make a phone call myself,
That's a really good tip. And was it a white person?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It was a white female. Yes.
Okay. And I kind of feel like that's kind of like mine to do as a white ally. It would be perhaps dangerous to do if you're Black or brown. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would think, because then it could, not all the time, but it can be looked at as you're interfering with what's going on, and so it's something about white presence, if you will, that holds power even in that moment. So as a white ally, like, you still hold a sense of power where it's most likely an officer would never say nothing to you. Versus if
kind of a friendly wave, I'm here.
Right. Mm-hmm. Versus if it was somebody, another, person of color or something, chances are they're going to ask them to back off or move on, or,
true story. That's what the Black Panthers did in the 60s. they pretty much rolled on that situation saying, excuse me, Mr. Officer, what's going on? And as they told him to back away, that's how all that stuff escalated. The FBI files and all that don't tell you that part of the story, but that's exactly what was going down. They're all about trying to navigate free lunches for free breakfasts and lunches for the neighborhood kids in school into the police due to the proliferation of anti-Black violence in quote unquote inner city ghetto neighborhoods.
Well,
so whenever they intervened, the police didn't like them intervening and they tried to exert force, and the Panthers were like, we're going to give you force back. So there you go. History lesson number 2.
Awesome, Chris.
I handled it. Sean,
Yeah,
you
Sean.
wrote the presentation yourself tonight. I'll go back to my room, go to sleep.
Sean,
No,
thank you.
get this.
Thank you, Sean, for that tip. And yeah, if you ever want to chime in tonight, please do. So yeah, Sean and Sean, if you're just joining us, was giving us advice on a question we got on our Facebook group today. A good way to be an ally is maybe to pull over and just be a watchful presence if you see a Black person out of the car being questioned by police. From a safe distance. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm happy, so happy to have such a good group here. I want to let you know I'm Lowry. Danita's here. Where'd she go? Oh, there you are. Oh, it's so fun to see all these faces. Hey, Sister Danita. I'm going to just get you guys started. I got to see and listen to Chris give this presentation to our teenagers a while back. And so I've gotten to learn from it. And Jessica's one of our executive board. She's here too. She's going to help watch the chat. And there's a way, so utilize that chat for any comments or questions you have. And also utilize your raise your hand thing. And Danita and Jessica will keep their eye on that as well. I do want to let you know that this is being recorded. And Danita, in a minute, you can make Chris, I guess as long as he's talking and sharing his screen, he'll be the main person viewed. But if you don't want your face on there for some reason, you can block your camera. We just want to be able to share it for people that miss it. So I wanted to let you know that. I'm also going to put a little link in here. We do feel like it's important when we have an expert, especially someone of color, sharing their expertise and their time with us and their effort, that we're paying them. So LHAMAR will be paying Chris. Nothing that we ever do requires payment, but if you feel like donating, I'm going to put our little PayPal link in here. I also wanted to say this Saturday, and I'll put a link for that, Danita and I are going to lead an anti-racism boot camp. Invite a friend. We're going to start doing this every other month so that hopefully everyone in our group and community can at least do this once. And it's Saturday morning from 10 to noon. Anyone is welcome. Kind of just anti-racism basics, but it will be great. And also watch Facebook and our website for, as some of you got the newsletter, we do have quite a few great events coming up in the lead up to the anniversary of George Floyd's death. So it comes at a really busy time, but I hope you have some space in your calendar to honor that. It is May 25th. Jessica, maybe you can put that in the chat, just so you know that's on your calendar, that's the anniversary of George Floyd's death. So the weekend and days up to that, and on that day, we'll have a few special events. I hope you can pick one to do with us. And Chris, I just want to tell a little about Chris. Chris helps lead some wonderful racial reconciliation talks through a book called Be the Bridge. And I want to let you know, we're going to offer
an organization.
Yeah.
Very vast and large organization.
Yes, which you guys have probably heard of the book. If you're interested, we're going to put a group together. It's pretty intense. We're going to put a group together through LHAMAR to do it over the summer once a week. I'll send out information about that. And this is just our initial go of it. We'll have other opportunities as well. Chris won an award for his volunteerism with anti-racism and diversity training with is it the Plano School District, Chris?
Plano ISD Independent School District for those outside of Texas. And I see Laura there clapping because she's a staunch member of that community.
Oh, that's awesome. I know y'all need it there just like we need it here, right? Well, Chris, thank you for being here. This is such an important presentation that takes on a little extra meaning tonight. I know you've got lots of history to share. So I will let you get started. You can share your screen and you guys use that chat for questions and comments.
Awesome. How is everyone feeling in light of this week? I know it's been a tough and a tenuous week in light of everything that we have had to go through as a people, not just Black and Indigenous people of color, but just us overall, just as a nation, as we find ourselves once again in grief and in lament over more Black death and Black harassment. And if all that wasn't enough, I messed around and was poking around on Facebook and I saw another incident of Black harassment that happened recently where a white Army sergeant was arrested for harassing a Black man who was simply walking through the neighborhood. So it seems as if this stuff just never ends. The band plays on and on and on. But in this particular time, in this particular moment, I just pray and hope that your hearts are receptive and able to receive where we're coming from tonight as we embark on this incredibly difficult yet incredibly necessary conversation about the N-word. One ground rule that I have to set: please honor and respect our family and community, particularly our Black brothers and sisters, by not uttering that word during this presentation. I will not be saying it. I will not be utilizing it, not even for any examples and this, that, and the other. So if there's any questions, any comments that want to be made, we will refer to it as the N-word, because as you can see by this opening slide, my entire thesis statement is that despite how the word has been so-called reappropriated, remixed, revived, and hadn't had its steam taken off, so to speak, it is a word that was bred in hate. It is a word that is fueled and energized with hate. And in the year of our Lord 2021, that has not changed by a long shot. And so I take that stand and I ask that you would show me the grace, mercy, and understanding of not referring to that word in your questioning as questions arise. So strap your seatbelts. If you require and need some Kleenex, you might want to have that stuff handy too, because we are about to go in. So I prayed. I'm confident that God is with us and that God is with me. So let's just dive on into this presentation.
Hey, Chris, can I take just a second and invite us? I was thinking about this today. Just the importance of taking a breath. And our therapist that's worked with us, Tatum, has reminded me of this. Sometimes when you just go through a lot of heavy stuff, of course, just taking some time to reflect. So we are about to do it. You know, I hope you'll breathe afterwards, but let's just start with a deep breath. And I just, whenever I think about breath, I was reminded today, you know, it's the first thing we come into life with. It's with us. It's the only thing that's always with us. It's the only thing that's constant until our last breath. And I think, of course, about George Floyd. I can't think of breathing anymore without thinking of his phrase, I can't breathe. So just giving thanks for that breath and centering ourselves here together.
Yep. You think of George Floyd, I think of Eric Garner.
So start with a breath.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, folks, let's go. So in terms just of history, the history of that word is often traced to the Latin word, I'm going to pronounce it Niger, or maybe it has a different pronunciation, whatever, but it's the Latin word Niger that simply means black. The word eventually became the noun Negro, black person in English, and simply the definition for the color black in Spanish and Portuguese. Quick disclaimer, a lot of the historical slides have been gathered and quoted from Neil A. Lester, who's the Dean of Humanities at Arizona State University. So I'll be quoting a lot of him in some of these. Lester goes on to say that in early modern French, Niger and Niger became negre and later negresse, a term that was unmistakably part of language history just as to define Black women. And one is able to compare to negre, that derogatory N word, and in earlier English substitutes, such as, and I'll do spelling because I don't want to accidentally pronounce the word, Negar, Neegar, Neger, and the closest thing we get to the venomous word, Niggor, Lester says, that developed into its lexico-semantic true version in English. He also suspects that it's probable that the N word is simply a phonetic spelling of the white Southern mispronunciation of the word Negro. Now, those of us who grew up in the South, I am born in St. Louis, Missouri, lived 32 years in Los Angeles, and am now, here in Texas. I don't really have that, but those who have that Southern heritage probably can zero in and lock into that white Southern pronunciation fairly easily, in all the weaponization, the venom, and the vitriol that comes with that. But Lester says, finally, as we look at these origins here, no matter what those origins are, by the time you get to the early 1800s, the word was established as a purely and distinctly derogative name. If there's any questions at this point, Jessica, Danita, Lowry, if you're still on, go ahead and flag me and I'll take questions before I move on to each slide.
No questions right now, Chris, you're good.
Thank you. Continuing on, Lester says, that word, the N word, carries with it much of the hatred and disgust directed specifically towards Black Africans and African Americans. Historically, that word was designed to define, limit, make fun of, and ridicule all Blacks. It was a term of exclusion, a verbal reason for discrimination. Whether that word was used as a noun, a verb, or an adjective, it strengthened the stereotype of this lazy, stupid, dirty, worthless nobody. Think back to the imagery that comes from the D.W. Griffith propaganda film, The Birth of a Nation. Think of those images, even though it was a silent film, just think of all the mockery that it showed when it depicted those images of Black bodies upon that screen. And although, again, it's a silent movie, but you can almost feel the pores in the venom of that word just oozing when you think about those images. And then you think further back to what our Black ancestors had to live through, walk through, and go through. Having that word just lunged at them while they had to slaughter those animals so the slave owners and their families could eat the choicest cuts of cow and pig and chicken. Think about that word in light of how they had to work sun up to sundown, as one of the old songs goes, picking that cotton. And if you didn't pick enough pounds of cotton for that day, what that constitutes, in with welts on your back and wounds and brokenness and crushing and all of that sort of thing. And you just hear all day, every day, they weren't humans. They weren't treated as equals. They were just tossed with that venom, inward, 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 while trying to do their best to survive. Lester continues, the N word, like all the false impressions it incorporates and means, puts down Blacks and rationalizes their abuse. The use of the word or its alternatives by Blacks has not lessened its hurt. That is not surprising in a racial hierarchy 4 centuries old, shaping the historical relationship between white European Americans and African Americans. Anti-Black attitudes, motives, values, and behavior continue. Historically, that word, more than any other word, captures the personal hatred and institutionalized racism directed towards Blacks. Any questions or any comments at this particular point?
So Alex put, was it Alex? Yes, Alex Cross put a comment in. He said he grew up in New Orleans. He just knew it was derogatory and it was never to be used. He couldn't remember who taught it to him. And then Amy shared that her grandmother was the first person using the word. And she remembered her mom very vividly being upset that she would use that word in front of kids. Alex. So yeah.
Thank you for all who have shared. Just jumps 2 steps ahead. There you go. Anybody have, thanks for those comments. Does anyone have a question for the room at this time? Oh, and Brian Harper says, unfortunately, that he hears it every day as a high school teacher, and I'm about to get to that.
Yeah, because I was about to, I'm glad you're about to address it, because I was about to ask Mr. Harper, what is your response when you hear it? What do you say to your student?
Well, first of all, every time I hear it, I'm like, do not use that in the school. I said, this is a professional setting. I said, it's offensive. I said, you need to learn you need to respect other people. And I just leave it like that, because then if you continue, then it just gets highlighted, because their viewpoint is that it's a relational, and they don't understand that it's offensive, and I don't think they understand the meaning, the history. So I think there's a miscommunication. So I just try to educate them.
Yes, put a pin in that, sir. We're going to get to that particular talking point in just a little bit, but thank you very much for sharing. Anybody else about the historical aspects of the word at this point in time? If nothing else, let's go ahead and move forward. And that's exactly what we're getting to. Black entertainers, everyday people using the word today, why in the world do they get a pass? And I have to point out that whenever folks are asking why someone is getting a pass and getting a free shot to use that word, it's always white to black directed. It's always that situation, at least in my observation. It's always a white individual saying, I don't understand why you are jumping on me or berating me for utilizing the word, when I get to hear this person, that person, my students, I go to a movie, I watch a TV show, they get to say it. I should be able to say that if you can't. And this next section should provide a little bit of light and information on that point. So, due to the impact of centuries of whites uttering and ushering that word towards Blacks and African Americans as a deliberately targeted insult against their dignity and self-worth, we find that large segments of the Black and African American community began to embrace the word as a statement of self-identity. So over the course of time, to hear Blacks and African Americans addressing each other using that word as part of their everyday speech was a normal and regular occurrence. I can tell you a million stories about living life as a child and watching my uncles, my cousins, Saturday mornings, at least 1 to 2 Saturdays a month. The ritual, if you were a Black male child, is you went to the barbershop and you got your hair cut. And it was commonplace to sit in that barbershop and you can hear all the conversations bouncing along. And you most definitely heard those brothers cutting heads, talking about life and politics and what have you, and they utilized and uttered that word. I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, I heard my cousins use it. I heard my uncles use it. Just, you know, it was just that often and just that common. Now, my thesis statement here is going back and saying that that's all due to the impact of centuries of that derogatory word used to identify us. Now, you had those individuals who took their stand and fought and said, oh, no, you will not be calling me that. And of course, even to this day, if a white person utters that word to another Black person, there is going to be some consequences. I'll just say consequences, needless to say. But again, just that ushering in that statement of just identity and dignity crushing, to where you heard it often so much that almost defines who you are. So it's what's up, N-word, this, you know, all of it, you know, normal, regular occurrences.
Chris, this is Jessica. We have a really good question in the chat from Sharon Bradley. And I know it's something that I've heard asked before. Was it primarily used in the US until recently?
Sliding back to my original slides, that goes back to pretty much the origins of slavery.
Hey, can I say something?
If I'm able to answer Sharon's questions that way. It's not that it's a recent occurrence. That word was just levied upon us from Jump Street. And again, from centuries from hearing it, we just adapted, unfortunately, and we took it upon.
Sharon, do you mean, was it used in other countries?
Of course it was.
Yes, I was just curious if I mean, I understand it originated in the US, it sounds like it originated in the US with slavery, but slavery was also in other countries as well. I was just curious if it proliferated there or is primarily a United States occurrence.
Yeah, I just slide you back to the first slide. I mean, it goes back to some variants on the original Latin word for black. So no matter what flavor, what form you have for it, it's somewhere in the course of history, that word got affixed and attached to us because of the original definition of that Latin word, black. And then there is another follow-up question asking if anyone ever has heard that phraseology, this word used in other countries. So if anyone wants to chime in and answer, feel free. Anyone? If Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just actually talking to a friend, and she's from Jamaica, and she was telling me, we were kind of having this conversation along these lines, and she was explaining that it's actually not a word they use there either, just because of the derogatory sense. So, and I've talked to other friends. I even had one of my best friends, who's literally from South Africa, Cape Town. And he also explained to me it's just not a word used there. So I found in just experience and talking to other people that it's not really used outside of the American context, for the most part. Not to say that hasn't ever been, but I don't think it's pretty much used. I think it has a lot of American context to it. And so I think we pretty much use it here, but I'm pretty sure there are some experiences. I won't, solely negate it to American.
Thank you, Sean. Continuing on, as I said before, in addition to regular everyday occurrences, we end up finding that the word usage became frequent in African Black centric entertainment on several categories. Before we move on there, I thought I saw in the chat Rachel McGowan wanted to say something.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say something on this. Do we get a pass to use the N word? And I don't think we get a pass to use it. And I do think it is an American word, but just as white and non-Black people need to educate themselves on the origin of the term, or like we all need to be educated on that piece, but we also need to be educated on the way and the why entertainers or comedians or
right
Black people, right? We also need to educate ourselves on the why they are using that terminology as well, and not think that, not that we ever get a pass, but the meaning is completely different. And it's sad to some of us, different opinions of it, but it's never justified to be used in with racial connotations to it. And that's not ever how Black people are utilizing that word. So I don't know if white people or people who non-white people I don't know that white people understand that. I think they think, oh, it's just a word and we're all going to use it the same way. It's never, ever used the same way.
Well, to that point, we originally did this presentation with LHAMAR's team group, and we were stunned to find out that our younger generation, African-American children, are doing the exact opposite of what you said, which is what shocked me enough to where it's like, we have to have more awareness and we have to have more conversations about this, because one of the young men absolutely just did a whole response to this, for the most part, saying that they have made changes in tried to repurpose the word for different meanings, which I will be getting to shortly. So I'll explain that within the next few minutes or so. Thank you, Rachel. So getting back to entertainment, by the time you hit the 1970s, of course, you've got comedians like Richard Pryor, Red Fox. You got TV shows blowing up like Jeffersons, Good Times, Sanford and Son, of course. And there's a whole move of Black cinema, which is now titled Blaxploitation, or for all intents and purposes, it was the first, not second, it was the second set of opportunities for Blacks to appear in films, you know, making money in Hollywood. So between those stand-up comedy routines, the movies, the TV shows, by the way, that's still going on today. It's commonplace to hear Black comedians, Black actors, you know, using this word. You know, there's movies that I've seen, you know, up to last year, you know. You even hear it in Bad Boys for Life, you know, when Martin and Will are joking, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith joking with one another, you know. And this actual word even shows up in 3 different movie titles from former football player Fred Williamson. Like there's there's 2 movies called based on this character called Charlie, but his name isn't Charlie, it's N-word Charlie. So they made one movie called The Legend of Blank Charlie, and that movie blows up. They made a sequel, The Soul of Blank Charlie. And then a couple years later, in the middle of that heyday, he pretty much, Fred Williamson writes and directs a movie called Boss Blank. And all of those trailers are available on YouTube. That song's even got a theme song. They call him Boss Blank. And it's like, it's cringy to even hear it, but it is what it is once again. And then the other long-standing controversy that I'm sure all of us are aware of within American culture is the usage of the word by Black musicians across multiple musical genres, particularly and especially rap and hip hop music in their song lyrics. DMX just passed away this past weekend. You hear it in his songs. By the time if I start doing the laundry list of how many rap artists you hear using that song, using that verbiage, and using that word, you know what I'm saying? You will be here all night. We'll be here all night, literally. So, and with that, as we step into the 21st century and even the latter part, by the time you get to 1990s and up, we find many African Americans led by those hip hop music artists, they began to do what Rachel was talking about. They say in their own words that they wanted to redefine and reshape and reappropriate the word as a term of endearment. So you have the original word, N-I-G-G-E-R. They slice off the ER, keep the N-I-G-G, and put an A on the end. And so many times you will find that word uttered with the possessive my in front of it, designed to signify personal relationship. Example, my blank, A, which they define as slang as my friend, my buddy, my pal. And this is where the past comes in, because I have heard with my own ears white men utilizing the term of endearment version of it. And when I called them out on it, they had the audacity to say to me, "Oh, I didn't mean ER, I meant my A. That's different." And I had to explain to them, no, it's not different. And going back to the teen group that I was able to lead, to unfortunately hear these young men on that call saying and recognizing and taking ownership of the fact that they reshifted it to signify a personal relationship was just heartbreaking news to hear. It was even said that one of the schools in the area, Larry and Jessica, that they were giving out, that Black students were giving white kids N-word passes. So the cool white kids, so to speak, get to utilize and utter the word for free without retribution or consequence, because in their mind, they're friends, they're buddies.
Chris,
And
I
it's
want
even
to.
more. Go ahead.
Hey, Chris, it's Yvette. I want to make sure I understand. So when you were doing this session with the teens, were those young men, young Black men who were using
Yes.
it with each other? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
no. These were young Black men giving their white students in the school the permission to utilize the word. That's what we're talking about.
Right. But before you got to that, were the young Black men using it with each other also?
Well, that goes back to, I believe, what was the gentleman? Who was the gentleman who spoke earlier? The teacher?
Brian, Mr. Harper.
Yeah, that was his point. And so,
Yeah, and they said, Yvette, they were saying, Chris, if I remember correctly, they did hear Black students using it with each other in the hallways.
right. And that's the whole argument behind why do they get the pass to use it? I should be able to use it too, because they say it to one another.
And
Right,
basically our answer to them as the white kids in that session was, Chris, is this right? It's never okay for you as a white person to use it.
My answer to the kids in the session, it's not okay for anyone to use it, let alone white kids. So while the young man was trying to explain to me how it was reappropriated, I pushed back and said, even still, that makes me sad, because it just speaks to me personally how much we have failed to go back and educate the current generation.
What I also remember, oh, sorry, Chris.
Because if we educated with this younger generation with the origins of the word, to let it be known that the purpose of the word was a word designed to hate and to demoralize and to dehumanize because of Black, brown, darker skin. Again, that's identity. Because I have that, because I have this, you have the right to use that word as an attack against me. So this mindset that we are now flipping that and reappropriating that as a means and as a standpoint to now bring some sort of power and dignity and to take the venom and sting off, which, by the way, I've heard many rappers and even some prominent Black professors justify. It's like we have lost our way as a collective and as a tribe. And personally, I think it's back to the point that I made earlier. It's the institutionalization of 400 years of being referred to as that. And so you embrace that toxicity and you embrace all that venom and sting. And on that point about toxicity, which is my next point, do we have any questions or anyone has any further comments before I move on?
I just want to say, Sean, you said something important. I would love for you to say your comment about how right or wrong that it does carry a communal sense. Do you want to say any more about that as a Black man?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. Yeah, I would just basically saying, whether we view it as right or wrong. And I think it's a known fact that it's, or it's known understanding that we view the word that it's wrong, but either side you take on that the word, particularly in the Black culture, has a very communal aspect to it. And so when it's used in the Black community, it's always going to be used differently because there's a sense. And so when we hear even comedians use the word, they're always referring to it in a very communicative way. And so it's a way of kind of relating to the Black community and the Black narrative. And so when you hear people, or when you hear outside groups particularly use the word, it's never going to have that same effect on it, and so I think this could be arguably true for any culture. It's just words inside that each culture tends to use that only the culture understands, right? And so I just think that's why when we kind of say it's definitely not okay for, particularly white culture to use the word, or white people to use the word, it's understand. And I think somebody said it earlier, words have power. So if we agree that the word is negative, right? Now imagine the power culture, or the dominant culture now using that word, right? It's already power on top of more power. So it's got a double effect. If I hear, it's one thing if I hear Chris say it to me, right? I may disagree with Chris and say, hey, Chris, don't use that word. It's not going to hurt so much if I may use you, or if I may, if you said it to me, it's going to take a different punch.
If you use it, you're canceled, and so is LHAMAR on the spot.
For sure. And is this point correct too? Like we were telling the white kids in our session, just because you've had this conversation and learned this doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to tell a Black student, no, don't use it because I learned this. Like that's not our job. Our job is just to not use it and then shut up.
Don't use the word, educate yourselves. Don't get super woke and try to bring that to another Black person. You asking for trouble.
Mm-hmm.
One last point before I move on, because we talk about Black comedians and their usage of it. In his stand-up routine, which is classic Live on the Sunset Strip, Richard Pryor tells the story of being in Africa and having spent time over there and watching all those African brothers and sisters in their pride and their honor and their dignity. He says, a voice spoke to him one day and said, look around and who do you see? I see doctors, I see presidents, I see bankers, I see lawyers, I see all kinds of beautiful people. The voice says in reply, do you see any N-words? Richard Pryor replies, no. The voice replies back, you know why? Because there aren't any. And he said that moment gripped him to tears, and he made a commitment for the rest of his career that he was not going to use that word in his stand-up or refer to another Black person in that word. And in his subsequent stand-ups later on, he doesn't use the word. He doesn't use the word. And he speaks about that. The phrase he used was, that was a word to describe our own wretchedness. Not that we were wretched, but the phraseology and the definition of wretched was attached to us. Again, toxicity. Toxic power of words. Because it goes, in terms of toxicity, I present you with this particular parable and to get understanding of why we appropriate. There once was a woman who was 18 years old, and she was sent to be in an arranged marriage by a rich man. The rich man was cruel, harsh, and terrible to her. Very abusive verbally, very abusive physically. Shortly after they were married, he summons up one of the maids to bring them a glass of tea to have in their bedroom. The young 18-year-old wife spills the tea all over the floor. The maid scrambling to clean it up. The husband looks at his new young bride and screams, "You idiot!" She takes this abuse for the next 50 years until the man has a heart attack. Now, because she was his wife, she inherits his property, his riches, everything. Short time later on, she's in the room by herself, Husband's gone, abuse is gone, all of that's gone. She has her maid send her up a glass of tea. She spills it all over the floor. The maid is scrambling to clean it up. She goes in shame, in dignity, in lack of dignity, looks at herself in the mirror and screams, "You idiot!" The toxicity of being called that abusive phrase, idiot, for 50 years of her life was able to seep in and get into the framework of her spirit, her psyche, and who she saw herself to be. It is my stance and my point of view that the embracing of this word into our community for whatever reason is an example of that. We've been so broken and so institutionalized that we have taken on this toxic poison and drunk it ourselves. And I stand on that. It is just as toxic as ever. The word always has been, and the word always will be. And we should never, ever forget its original intent. And it's quoted once again here by Dean Lester. We know, at least in the history I've looked at, that the word started out as just a descriptor, Negro, with no value attached to it. We know that as early as the 17th century, Negro evolved to the N-word as intentionally derogatory, and it has never been able to shed that baggage since then. Even when Black people talk about appropriating it and reappropriating it, the poison is still there. The word is inextricably linked with violence and brutality on Black psyches and derogatory aspersions cast on Black bodies. No degree of appropriating it can rid it of that blood-soaked history. I'm in full agreement with the dean on this, and I just hope and pray that of all the things that we're trying to get better for our lives as Black lives that matter, that that's one of the words that we can shed. Personal testimony, I was so gripped myself by George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery that came before, that after seeing those, what we thought was 8 minutes is now over 9 minutes of that white knee on his neck, I committed in my heart that I'm never going to use that word again. And so through lots of prayer and lots of focus and discipline, I've been able to remove that word from my own personal vocabulary and to not utilize it and to speak it against any of my brothers and sisters, no matter how bad, no matter how crazy I think that they are in behavior wise. I just made the commitment to stop. Because I can't be sitting in this space as an anti-racism educator and leader, and more than that, as a Black man of honor and dignity, if I still endorse in my heart the usage of our brothers and sisters utilizing that word. Floor is open for any questions, comments. If we need to dialogue, whatever we need to discuss, let's go.
Thank you so much, Chris, for doing all that research and teaching us about it so thoughtfully. Thank you. Thank you. I'm curious if anyone wants to share. Has anyone had an experience?
Larry,
Yeah.
Yvette has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Yvette.
So Chris, I guess one of the questions I have, so I understand that some of the Black community in using this word is trying to redefine it or take the power away or use it in a different way. You know, you shared that you disagree with that. What do you think would have to happen for the members of the Black community that continue to use it to change? Is it like, you know, I know we want the United States to change. You talked about at the beginning, lamenting the many things that have happened this week. So I'm just curious to see, is there, if we could achieve something as a people, would that allow the word to go away? Or do you think there's always going to be part of the population that just, you know, is claiming it as a power stance, if you will?
Educate, educate, educate. Again, you have to get rid of this notion that, oh, we have reappropriated the word and taken its power away. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Scriptural principle. I'm a Christian. I stand on that. Our people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. What ended up happening in our generation, those of us who were able to quote unquote move on up, so to speak, in the 70s and the 80s, and as we started achieving financial success, those were the principles that we passed on, that a lot of our parents passed on to us. Get that money, get that money, get that money. Some of us retained the history. Some of us were taught and retained the honor, but so many of us did not, because all we saw, okay, we're free, doors are open, get this money, get this money, get this money. And we've, like I said, we failed to go back and educate our people. We failed to go back and educate our children to say, this is the definition, this is the power behind that verbiage, this is why we can't use it. And there's still, I'm proud to say, is a large and mighty contingent of African-American brothers and sisters who have zero tolerance of that word being used. And they will check you. They will check you if you use that word in their presence. It's not allowed in every home. It's not allowed in every community. But, you know, answering that question for you, that it's just going to take not just education, but an uplift of pride, honor, community, and strength within ourselves. We're at a place right now where we keep asking majority culture to give it to us. They don't want to. Many on that side don't want to. But that's okay, because we can go back and reclaim it for ourselves. And that's what you're seeing in the marches, in the protests. As these incidents keep happening, you are seeing us taking that stand. And as we continue to take these stands, I'm watching the honor come back. I'm watching the dignity come back. I'm watching the power to come back.
So Chris, Brian had a question in the chat, and you somewhat have answered it already. And then I want to tack onto the question as well. What would you suggest to those in education or other professional settings who hear people say it? So
let's define people. Again, I do not recommend that any non-Black person correct or reprimand a Black person on the use of that word. I don't think it's going to end well. I don't think it's going to end well. Danita, are you in agreement? Do you have a different opinion?
So I'm in an agreement to a degree. Yeah, I can see if we're sitting in the cafe and you hear people of colors, adults saying that, then that might be a little heat come your way from trying to correct them from saying it. But if you're an educator or a professional person and you're in that setting and you hear it, as an educator, for me, it is your duty to educate that student, whether it's my student or someone else's student. The fact that that word is not acceptable in the language, I don't care what language you're talking about, the English language, broken English language, Ebonics, it's not acceptable. I don't allow the word in my house, and I don't allow my children to say the word. So it's going to be offensive when they hear it, whether it's said by another person, student of color or not. It's going to be offensive. And so to have an administrator or a teacher stand by and allow that word to be heard, and then my kids look at you like, okay, you're not going to say anything, then that becomes a problem for them. That becomes a problem for them. In a professional setting, I think someone made a comment. She saw someone being a young Black man being pulled over, and she wanted to stop. That's the same instinct you should have in a professional setting when you hear that word. That's the same instinct. You should stop whatever you're doing, faxing, copying, taking your break, and stop right then and there. Okay, hey, I couldn't help but overhear, but you said this, and that is not okay anywhere in this office. And not even that you're their boss. You can be their, coworker, what have you, under them. We have to start correcting people and not being afraid to correct people. We have to get out of this fear that it's not my business. Especially when it comes to our students, we have to get out of this. Well, that's not my business. I'm not going to get involved in it. Please, we've gone long away from the way of it takes a village to raise a child. Now the villages consist of one house now, and that's yours. And we need to get back to the fundamental basics of it takes a village to raise a child. You correct mine, guess all I'm going to tell mine when they come home and say, well, so Mr. Bryan corrected me in school. Okay, and did he send you to the office? We have to get back to that type of parenting and that type of wanting to do better than the next or better than the last generation. Just because it's okay, just because people of color have assumed that it's okay to say that word, it's not really okay. Who said it was okay? Who said it was okay? It's not okay to me. So who said it's okay?
Pardon me. They will go back and quote their favorite rap songs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have a thing in my house. And I think Mallory touched on it. What do you say about just for your kids that listen to the songs in the songs that have it over and over? My kids listen to clean versions.
They still make clean versions nowadays?
Yes. And I pay your cell phone. I didn't know. I pay your cell phone bill, so you're gonna listen to what I pay for. And that's how I look at it. If I hear it coming out of the phone is gone. I pay your bill. You don't pay your bill. So if you have a problem with that, I suggest you find you another genre of music to listen to and keep it moving. But as long as I'm paying your bill and you're under this here establishment, then it's gonna be clean versions, or we're gonna listen to Shark do. We're gonna make us some songs. We gonna bop to something, but it doesn't have to be that.
We gonna bop to that.
Hi. Sorry to interrupt. There's some really good conversation going on in the chat, and specifically in regards to education setting. And I just wanted to, because I'm not a very fast typer, I wanted to clarify something. So in Richardson District, in the Student Code of Conduct, and I know this because we had an incident this year, using the N-word is considered derogatory, and it is taken very seriously when, as far as disciplinary action. So when we say it is a vulgar word, the consequences of using this word towards someone else in any kind of matter actually weigh heavier than it would, for instance, saying the B word, to somebody. So so I think that educating the students on not just the consequences, but the history. This conversation just keeps on reaffirming how in the education setting, we need to teach accurate American history so that our students understand the significance of the words that they are using. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. And to piggyback off what Jessica said, that's why it's so important for parents, educators, administrators, school board members to fight for and push T for accurate history in our schools. This white splain history that's being taught is hurting our kids more than it's helping our children. When we moved here from Mississippi 4 years ago, my kids came home and Denham said to me, he said, "Mom, where did you move us to?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Do you know these kids have no idea who Emmett Till is?" You know, we have to, as a unit, as a community, we have to push for this. We have to push for this. I still have issues with American history being a required class to graduate, but African American history is not. I have a problem. I have a problem with that. I have a deep problem with that. Why is a watered down history required to graduate and a true history is not? And so we have to address these issues within our schools, because we have the power to change that. Just having these conversations here, we have the power to change that. We go, we have school board meetings, we have PTAs, we have all these different committees that are set up. We have the tools in the toolbox. We just got to use them. Because at the end of the day, I know we love to say it, but at the end of the day, we got to start walking the walk and talking the talk.
I was just going to say, and to your point, the fight that we are engaged in now against anti-racism in America, we have to bring this back to that conversation, front and center, in the forefront. If we're gonna cancel Dr. Seuss 6 books, if we're gonna cancel anything else, let's work on canceling this word in any of its ways, shape, or forms. Because our Jewish brothers and sisters have slurs. If those are used, instant cancellation. Our Latin brothers and sisters have words. Use them, you're canceled. As we watch that tragedy in Georgia with our Asian brothers and sisters in the continuing attacks that they've had, all the slurs that are uttered against them, instant cancellation.
So we want to be respectful of everyone's time, and this and Larry can tell you, I have random thoughts that pop into my head.
Right.
I used to keep up with the text lingo of kids, the short terms, the acronyms that they use, because I wanted to know what was coming through my kid's phone. I wanted to be able to keep up. It took me a minute to learn out what ROTFL was. It took me a minute, but it was just rolling on the floor. But it took me a minute, but I got it. So my call to action for everyone that's on this call, if you have heard any type of derogatory word, slur, with regards to any other ethnicity, email me so we can compile a list and share this amongst our educators, our teachers, our administrators, so they will know. Because in all honesty, I'm being serious, there are some words that'll come across the lips of students and teachers don't even know that it's an offensive word. Parents don't even know that's an offensive word because children change their lingo so often.
Adults do too, believe it or not. Because getting to that point, if I can just share, one of the things that the modern day Republican Party instituted back in the 1970s, actually going back to the 60s, is part of their quote unquote Southern strategy was all about replacing the N-word with certain phrases in verbology to replace that word in order to levy the same kinds of attacks. So you can't say the N-word, but you can say busing. You can't say the N-word anymore, but you can say lower income housing and those sorts of things. And there's a whole playbook and strategy that Lee Atwater put together as a way to say the word without actually saying the word, but you striking the same blow in the same sentiment. And so we have to train ourselves to recognize those phrases as well, like Danita's saying.
So before we close out, do we have any lasting comments or questions anyone want to wrap up? It's
Michelle.
I saw a hand raised.
Michelle, is that how I say your name?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, glad you're
Hi,
here.
Hi, everyone. I'm a teacher at J.J. Pierce High School, and this is all great and all, and I love all this, but the true truth is parenting is huge. As educators, we can do and say and have all these rules. If I were to put all my students who say the N-word, we wouldn't have no more classes because they'd all be in ISS. All of them. 2,600 students, they would all, you wouldn't even come get your kid. They said it again today. We can't, as teachers, you can't stop an entire lesson because you hear this or that or that. In my classroom, I don't live and die by the N-word because they know when they step in, it's not, we don't use them type of words. But not everybody is like me when it comes to that. If I hear it happening in a white teacher's class 2 doors down, and if I hear it, I'm walking down there and say inappropriate, not happening. But not everybody has my personality and has that fight. So we have to empower our teachers more to go, you know what? As a white person, what do you not understand about the Black culture? I talk about it with my white kids all the time. We come in there, I'm like, they want to know about weave. We talk about it. They want to know about Black culture when it comes to any food, whatever it is, because they don't know. And then when they say the N-word, we jumping down, my students will jump down on them. And I'm like, stop. We have to teach. Teach your fellow students, okay? And I don't like doing it all the time because I'm actually exhausted from teaching people how to be, normal. I'm exhausted, but as I have a child and my husband is white, and I refuse to let her go to a school with nothing, feeling like she doesn't matter or it's okay to act like this and it's okay to act like that. But I need all my parents. Stand up. You hear it? Come to the school. White parents is at school. I'm gonna tell y'all right now, anything happen with their child, they come to school. Anything that happen with the minorities kids, we can't get y'all to come in the school. It starts at home. Thank you for letting me talk.
Sean Jackson has a question. Thank you so much, Nichelle.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really have a question. I wanted to really just add on to what she was saying. I think it does start I think it starts at home. I think, we could, as educators, like you said, we can put a lot of rules and stuff in place and a lot of stuff, but just from being Black and I was raised in, born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the words was used like nothing in my community. But one thing was for sure is my parents made sure we never used that word in the house. And so I can, as a 31-year-old young man, I can say I've successfully never used the word. I've been around, my best friends used the word like saying their own name. It's like clockwork. They knew the word well. It was how they referred to everything. But I never heard the word in my house. I didn't need to take it out. So when I was outside of home, I didn't need to use it, even though it was the echo chamber language around me, and so, but for me, I think it just started at home, and so I think the way we keep it out of the schools and everywhere else, it just has to start at home, I think. And so even, I think Danita spoke to it like earlier, it's like, what are kids listening to at home? Like it all starts, everything's going to start in the home. And it's not going to, I don't think it'll fully eradicate it, but I think it does slow it down enormously, because if I can do it as, just a Black man in my own experience, my friends didn't use it because, and it was even weird because I felt my friends slowed down in using it because they had a respect for me and my family. So when they came around us, they just stopped using it. Now, as soon as they got away from us, I imagine they probably used it again, but they had enough respect. And my dad or mom never had to say, hey, don't say that. They sensed a level of respect. And I think kids today have that too, but I think we have to set the atmosphere to where as a young lady just spoke, I think if there's a tone set even in the classroom, hey, this is not what we're going to do here. We're not going to speak that type of language. I think people know what's allowed and not allowed. And so, I know it's different for each person. So I'm not trying to apply one rule here, but I do think a lot of it does start in the home, and that helps. But as Chris said earlier, I think is the biggest thing, educate. Like my dad sat down with me when I was young and just said, hey, this is why we're not going to say this word. And it was just a basic educating understanding of, hey, this is why we don't say this is what it means, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, okay, this is a negative word. And so I think somebody put in the comments earlier, like, I viewed it as a cuss word. I was like, hey, you just don't say that. Not because it's even connected to the Black community or anything like that, or degrading to us. I was just like, that's a negative word. I don't want to use it. I don't want to refer to anything or anybody that way, right? So it's just certain words I don't use to describe, to anybody. So, and that's just one of those words, because in my mind, I placed it as it's a negative. And I think if we just educate our loved ones and people around us, I think we can kind of help, deal with some of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks, Chris, for your presentation. Thank you all for getting on here and being vulnerable and listening to people speak, to the dialogue, because this is what it's going to take to change our community, change the communities around us. It's got to start somewhere. It doesn't, you can take any incident or instant and make it, as my mom would say, a teachable moment. And using the N-word, if you hear, is a teachable moment, and adults can be taught to. So again, thank you, Chris, everyone that joined us tonight. This was, I was a little hesitant about the topic, about the conversation, because it was bringing back other stuff. But I'm actually glad that that I got on and we had good dialogue. This is dialogue that needs to continue. And on a lighter note, let me update you guys. Only Larry knows this. I haven't shared it with anyone else. Most of you probably know, read, or heard back during the season, football season, my son was called the N-word on the field. And there was a lot of get back, and Dr. Stone reached out to me immediately, and Leslie Solback, and the coach of the opposing school team. And so when my son sat down and I sat down with them, with the district, we had two goals. We wanted acknowledgement and an apology, but we also wanted some education to come from this. And so the district, starting in August, they're going to be utilizing the athletic programs to have mandatory cultural diversity trainings with all athletes. So if your student is an athlete, he will go through these cultural diversity trainings. And again, it only takes one instance to be a teachable moment to turn into something different. And so I leave you all with that. There can always be something positive that comes out of something negative. So everyone, enjoy your evening. My dog is nipping at my heels. It's time for her to go out. So thank you all for joining us, and you all have a good night.
Make good trouble.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. It was great.
Thank you, ladies.
Be safe.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, LHAMAR.
Bye. You're welcome.